I grew up in an agnostic family in central Sweden, but I had a large extended family of Protestant Christians and even some Pentecostalists. When it came to traditional Scandinavian Christianity, there were always levels of cultural paganism sprinkled in. This is also something that shaped many of the Swedish national holidays. I spent much of my childhood traveling to Hälsingland to visit my extended family. My grandparents on my mother's side were agnostic and more culturally diverse, while my grandparents on my father's side were Protestant Christians who loved telling me stories of the trolls and giants and Vaesen that had allegedly shaped nature and society of rural Hälsingland. There are church ruins scattered across all over Sweden, and we used to drive past many of these on our way to and from our grandparents or the summer cabin. And both my father and my grandparents loved telling completely made-up stories of how those churches had become ruins. And there were almost always giants and trolls involved. These memories have made me somewhat nostalgic about Scandinavian folklore, which is why I became interested in checking out Free League's tabletop role-playing game Vaesen. Here you play as one of Thursday's children, a person able to see the supernatural. The term Thursday's children comes from folklore as well, with different traits prescribed to children born on different weekdays. Those who were born on Thursdays were said to travel and witness a lot, which is why the term is used to describe those with the sight in-game. The word Vaesen basically translates to supernatural being, and they are fantastical creatures that live side by side with humanity. People without the sight cannot see them, but they leave traces that can be detected, and their actions have impact upon society. As 19th century Scandinavia is heading towards industrialization and massive societal change, the Vaesen are changing as well. They are becoming more vicious and act more out of character to what people are used to. The old rules and traditions no longer apply. The player characters operate from Uppsala in central Sweden, where they have inherited the old castle Gyllenkrus to use as headquarters for their organization called the Society. This is an old organization that was disbanded 10 years ago, but that the players are now trying to re-establish. Uppsala is a good place to have your headquarters because it's both centrally located, which makes it easy to travel all over Scandinavia, but it's also one of Sweden's oldest cities with a rich history that goes all the way back to Old Norse. Unlike many other role-playing games where you have a setting that you build your own stories in, Vaesen presents an established premise. You're trying to re-establish the society, while Vaesen all over Scandinavia are acting up in various ways. You go on missions to protect humanity from Vaesen, investigate tales and mysteries, and trying to learn the rituals needed to banish or defeat the vengeful Vaesen, or perhaps accommodate their desires by fighting for changes in the communities they take their vengeance upon. The headquarters acts as a hub between adventures, but the players can also roleplay scenes and situations in the headquarters itself as well as in surrounding Uppsala. It's very easy to consume media that aims to represent the culture you're familiar with, only to make you aware of how poor that representation is. Ari Aster's 2019 horror film Midsommar was so embarrassing that I had to turn it off 30 minutes in. The fact that I know the region where it was supposed to take place made it difficult to watch as well, since it was filmed in a country with a completely different climate than the actual place. This is common in media overall though. I remember watching the first season of Vikings and laughing at the representation of Uppsala as it shows lush hills and waterfalls in an area that's actually as flat as a pancake. It's easy to ignore things like that, but the more familiar you are with something, the more aware you become of its faults, and the more frustrating certain things can be that most people either don't notice or don't care about. Vaesen is representation done right because it's made by people from the culture who cares about the culture. As I read the book, I couldn't help but feel nostalgic about the stories I got to hear as a kid and how closely the game portrayed my own experience. I felt inspired to create my own stories where the players could visit the places I visited as a kid, such as the forests and church ruins of Hälsingland. I understand, however, that I view the game with rose-tinted glasses because of that. If you're unfamiliar with Scandinavian history and folklore, this game could come off as oddly foreign to you in a way that could either put you off or intrigue you depending on who you are and what your interests are. The entirety of the game takes place in 19th century Scandinavia, and the book presents the surface details about how Scandinavia looked at the time. Since most players around the world will be unfamiliar with the era and culture, the game points out that it's not supposed to be historically accurate. It doesn't represent a specific period of the 19th century, and you can blend details from the entire 1800s as well as come up with completely new things without having to feel like you're doing the setting a disservice. The book itself encourages this, and I think that's a helpful way of making the game more approachable for an international audience. I mentioned that it's important with good representation in my bashing of Midsommar and Vikings, but you don't actually need to research the setting in Vaesen beyond what the game offers. You get the surface details, you get a culturally honest, even if it's not a 100% accurate representation of the history and folklore that's supposed to carry the mysteries, and you build the rest of the game yourself to match your own vision. If you want to move the game to Germany or the US or Japan, then you're free to do so, but it will require some homebrewing at your table. You can create new Vaesen based on different cultures around the world, you can throw in the Cthulhu mythos or do any kind of change you want. The game is based on Scandinavian folklore, and that's the setting and story provided in the book, but the core game experience itself can stand on its own, even with a different flavor. The player character is a 19th century human gifted with a sight, and their character creation is divided into 3 sections: personality, characteristics, and miscellaneous. Under personality, you decide 1 out of 10 archetypes: academic, doctor, hunter, occultist, officer, priest, private detective, servant, vagabond, and writer, as well as age, name, motivation, the nature of the trauma that gave you the sight, as well as a dark secret. Under characteristics, you distribute points across your 4 attributes: physique, precision, logic, and empathy, as well as your 12 skills: agility, close combat, force, medicine, ranged combat, stealth, investigation, learning, vigilance, inspiration, manipulation, and observation. You also gain 3 talents from your archetypes. These are tricks and traits that the character can do in different situations. Under miscellaneous, you select relationships, resources, equipment, and mementos, the latter being a single item of sorts that holds special meaning to you. Since this is a free league game, the system is based on the Year Zero Worlds engine. This is a rules-light system where you build pools of d6s by combining a skill with its associated attribute. If you roll at least 1 6, you're successful, though some difficult tests may require more 6s. If you fail a test, you can choose to push the roll. This lets you re-roll all dice that aren't 6s, after which you suffer from a condition such as exhaustion, rattered, wounded, angry, frightened, or hopeless, depending on the nature of the situation. When fighting Vaesen in the game, you can rarely defeat them using combat alone. Instead, you can use your skill tests and combat scenarios to hold the Vaesen off until you manage to perform the rituals necessary to defeat them. You can suffer both mental and physical injuries, which can lead to critical injuries causing defects and insights. A defect means that your body has sustained an injury of some kind, such as an injured arm which penalizes ranged combat, or a cracked skull which causes brain damage that reduces learning. A mental critical injury could cause defects such as shattered confidence, which reduces inspiration, or impaired impulse control, which reduces stealth. Some critical injuries can also trigger insights, which give some kind of supernatural power beyond the human norm. An example of a physical insight is supernatural focus, which increases ranged combat, and an example of a mental insight is absolute empathy, which increases observation. An important part of this game is also what kind of items you bring with you on your missions. Because it's a rules-light system, items are straight to the point in their applicability. They often come with some kind of bonus and some kind of effect. For example, a pair of binoculars give a +2 bonus and lets you use vigilance from a distance. Simple provisions give you +1 bonus and lets you last several days without force tests. An elegant disguise gives you a +2 bonus and is sometimes required for certain manipulation tests. The actual bonus is to the skill test that item is used for. Equipment aren't bought using an actual currency. Instead, the character may attempt to buy preparatory equipment by rolling a number of dice determined by the resources. The successes from this roll must equal or exceed the listed availability ratings on the items you're looking for. For example, since binoculars have availability 2, you must roll 2 or more successes to acquire them. A character with a high roll can choose to donate successes to another player to help them out with their equipment, and players can also choose to combine their successes in order to reach higher availability ratings. Once the characters are on site and want to barter for goods with NPCs, they can make a post roll for manipulation at bonuses determined by the resources. It otherwise functions the same, with the successes being compared to availability. An important part of the game are the Vaesen themselves. They and humans have lived side by side for thousands of years as both adversaries and allies. There are a number of different types in the book. Nature spirits are humanoid creatures such as trolls, vater and giants. Familiars are creatures crafted by magic. Shapeshifters are people who can turn into animals or monsters such as werewolves, mares and witches. Spirits of the dead are deceased humans who linger in the world of the living such as ghosts and revenants. Monsters are creatures whose characteristics are more animal than human, such as lindworms, sea serpents, and the kraken. Vaesen are often proud and vengeful with no regard for moral considerations. They have access to magical powers that can attack enemies, frighten people, and alter reality. There are 3 types of powers. Enchantments are magic that affects a location and the people living there. Curses can be used to attack PCs, and Trollcraft involves bending time and space to alter reality in various ways. Some Vaesen can use all types, while others can use 1 or 2. Unlike other characters, Vaesen don't have attributes or skills. Instead, they use the 4 stats Might, Body Control, Magic and Manipulation when used in conflicts with PCs. They also have a 5th stat called Fear, which PCs must test against the first time they come across the creature. When confronting a Vaesen in physical combat, it's possible to bring it down, but doing so doesn't kill it. Each Vaesen has its own specified effects for what happens when brought down physically. In order to ultimately defeat them, the players need to perform a ritual specific to the Vaesen in question, and part of the mystery of the game is to find out the secrets about the Vaesen and what ritual can defeat it. Not every threat is a Vaesen though. The players can also go up against people and beasts that are dangerous in other ways, but that can more directly be defeated physically, socially or politically. A good game should keep the Vaesen fairly rare and use people and other creatures as their own threats and obstacles in the way of achieving one's own goals and towards uncovering the larger supernatural mysteries. A basic campaign of Vaesen consists of the players solving a number of mysteries and improve their headquarters in Uppsala. The canon headquarters is Castle Gyllenkruis, but there's nothing preventing you from having a different headquarters or changing the location entirely. You're encouraged to roleplay how the world outside reacts to you having moved into the castle as well. There could be journalists coming to ask questions, police officers making investigations, or criminals breaking in to steal. Even though the game focuses heavily on the Vaesen mystery formula, you're still free and encouraged to explore more of the setting and roleplay encounters and situations outside of the specific formula. Chapter 9 describes in detail how the GM can go about crafting their mystery. It gives suggestions on how to decide an appropriate Vaesen, what to think about when it comes to the actual location, the atmosphere and the clues that will be revealed. To add a sense of intensity and time to the mystery, the GM can think of ways to have the situation deteriorate step by step during the course of play. If you want a scarier experience, there's a list of details to think about in order to add that extra level of suspense and creepiness and horror to the mystery. Regardless of whether you use Castle Gyllenkruis or different locations or headquarters, it's important to have one for a longer campaign because it provides story and progression opportunities. In between mysteries, the players can hire staff, explore unknown parts of the castle, add new facilities, renovate existing ones and more. The players gain development points, which they can use to buy upgrades to the headquarters. Every time the players do so, there's a risk for some kind of threat to be associated with it, such as a ghost being tied to a specific new section. There are 3 types of upgrades you can acquire for your headquarters: facilities, contacts and personnel. Facilities are new rooms or functions, contacts are people who can help you out, and personnel are servants or new members of the society. Upgrades provide functions and assets which can be used once per mystery, such as the Armorist function, which lets each PC bring a melee weapon or armor with availability 2 without having to use resources. The Infirmarist function makes it possible to push all physical recovery rolls. The Chapels function lets you push all mental recovery rolls, but it also has an asset that lets PCs bring with them holy water on their missions. The end of the book also contains an introductory mystery called the Dance of Dreams, which is a good way to introduce a new group to the game and which should take about 2 to 3 sessions to complete. Vaesen is a good role-playing game not because it's an original concept presented in a straightforward way. It's also a good role-playing book overall. This is an art book just as much as a role-playing book with beautiful illustrations made by Johan Egerkrans. He has illustrated more than 100 books since his debut in 2005 and has even published his own books based on folklore and the supernatural. This game is just as much defined by its art style as by the play experience, if not more. When it comes to Vaesen as a role-playing game, it follows the formula that makes free league games from recent years so successful. The system is straightforward and easy to learn, the book is less than 250 pages, and it provides plenty of helpful tools that the GM can use to quickly create stories. The text in the book is concise and to the point, presenting only what's important and useful instead of submerging the game in a sea of fluff that's common in so many other games. Scattered across the pages are also sidebars and sayings tied to Scandinavian folklore that add to the world building. Because of my personal experiences with Scandinavian culture, I think that I and probably many other Scandinavians could fall in love with this game more than the average international role player. It's a very niche game with a simple and straightforward premise, and it's possible that the concept is too foreign for many international players to resonate with them on the same level that it resonated with me. I'm curious though to learn more about how it's been received by role players around the world with no connection to the subject matter, and if you feel that it presents these concepts in a way that's easy to get into. I believe that it does, from the impression the book gave me, but I can't say for sure. I absolutely recommend the game to Scandinavian players with interest in history and folklore just for the premise of the game itself, but I also recommend the game to everyone else as well because it's actually a good game by itself. The series of mysteries work well as both a one-shot adventure and as part of a greater campaign, and the game mechanics surrounding the headquarters and the preparations for the next adventure is a fun way to add value and customization to what could otherwise have easily been overlooked. The headquarters becomes its own character in a way, and how the players choose to progress it shapes the way they'll approach future mysteries. Finally, it's a charming game that values cooperation and exploration, and it shows that even the conflicts between Vaesen and humans aren't black and white. The players can explore themes regarding technology versus nature, science versus religion, as well as us versus them, in a way that can be deeply meaningful. If you just want to go look for monsters as a form of escapism, you can do that as well. If you like this video and want to see more, make sure to like, comment, share and subscribe. Also make sure to visit my Patreon if you want access to more content, such as the playtesting document for my sci-fi game Machineborn. Next month, I'm going to review another niche free league game, Mörk Borg. Until next time.